Meet Melody. Melody has just begun 5th grade. Her parents chose her name well because Melody loves to sing. She doesn't love school very much, though. Melody has decided that she isn't very smart, and every new school day acts as further proof. This is Melody's state testing history in language arts. She doesn't have any severe reading disabilities. The teacher loves her. She's a good kid and a hard worker. We know that fostering a love of learning will be crucial to her success. Something has to change for Melody, and it has to change now. EVAAS is a powerful tool that can be used to put each student on a trajectory toward success by setting goals to maximize student growth each new school year. More importantly, if used properly, it can have a profound effect on our students' self-efficacy and foster a love of learning. As teachers, we're held accountable to managing a curriculum for each of our students. But what exactly does curriculum really mean? The term often refers specifically to a view of the student's experiences in terms of the educator's or school's instructional goals. The word curriculum began as a Latin word, which means a race or the course of a race. The ancient Greeks equated curriculum to a race because of the goals or finish lines that were established before the race began. It didn't in any way refer to a certain pace. This is the full extent of the 5th grade English Language Arts institutionalized curriculum. There are 44 Common Core standards, including language, writing, speaking and listening, and foundational skills of reading. These standards represent a vast array of knowledge, skills, and understandings that a 5th grade student may encounter in his or her classroom. This can be incredibly overwhelming to a teacher who only has 180 days with his or her 28 kids. These 12 standards represent the tested curriculum. The state uses a percentage correct on each of its assessments to measure proficiency. But what does proficient really mean? By definition, it means very skilled at something you've learned. Students will need 31 out of 44 operational items correct to be considered proficient in 5th grade reading. This amounts to about 70% correct. The state also tells us about how many items or test questions we can expect to assess each standard. If a student needs 31 items correct to be considered proficient in 5th grade reading, it's possible that one student is very skilled at a certain set of standards, while another student is very skilled at another, and both would be considered proficient. If our aim is for every student to be proficient by the end of the school year, we have an opportunity to be very deliberate about which skills we want which students to have mastered, because the majority of students will not be expected to get every question on the assessment correct. In fact, assessment writers incorporate something called stretch into their standardized tests. This means that the test is constructed in a way that will allow for very few students to get all of the answers correct, and at the same time allow for very few students to get none of the answers correct. They do this so that there will be a wide variance in the state percentiles that kids will place into. In terms of state percentile, a student will have to fall into the 48th percentile to be considered proficient in 5th grade reading. EVAAS projects that if Melody falls into the 4th percentile this year, she'll have had an average year of growth compared with her peers across the state. It's unreasonable to expect that Melody climbs to the 48th percentile in 180 school days, but we can certainly shoot for a lot higher than the 4th percentile. After all, there's nothing average about Melody. Percentile isn't the percentage correct a student received on the test. Imagine percentile as a long line of students. If a student scores in the 99th percentile, it just means that he or she scored higher on that test than 99% of the students across the state. If a student scored in the 1st percentile, it means that 99% of the kids across the state had higher scores than his or her score. To be considered proficient in 5th grade reading, students will essentially have to get more items correct than 48% of the kids across the state. There's a little more to it, but that's it in a nutshell. EVAAS projects which percentile each student will fall into based on their prior testing history if they were to receive an average year's worth of growth or a standard educational experience, as compared to the other students across the state that are taking that particular test. Each of our 5th grade students will be tested on the same standards at the end of the year, but EVAAS gives us a better idea of how much of that test they'll have to get correct in order to grow academically. The test is actually assessing each student's mastery of specific reading skills as outlined by the Common Core standards. We can estimate how many items each student will need to get correct in order to fall into their projected state percentile. A student projected in a higher percentile will have to have an understanding of a greater number of standards than a student with a lower projection. It's likely that the student projected in the higher percentile comes into the school year with a mastery of a greater number of grade level reading skills. Upon assessing students early in the year, we determine which skills each student enters the grade level with, and then set goals for the mastery of new reading skills to each individual student appropriately. But how does this help us with our thinking about Melody? Melody is projected to score in the 4th percentile. As a grade level, we decided on which skills were most important or foundational for our students. We ranked them and prioritized them from least to most critical to student progress and success in 5th grade reading, preparing for 6th grade, and for life beyond. We also added some skills outside of the content area curriculum that we decided were important to deliberately grow in our students. Then we pinpointed focus areas for each student, and after early assessments of Melody, we made adjustments. We narrowed our focus to the areas we believe will be critical in her success this year. We want to be realistic in the amount of growth we can expect in a year. We believe that having Melody master a handful of foundational reading skills rather than expose her to the entirety of either the institutionalized or tested curriculum will better prepare her for future success and instill confidence in her abilities. To ensure that Melody has been given 1 year's worth of academic growth in reading, as far as EVAAS is concerned, she'll need an estimated 18 items correct on the EOG. If we spend the year ensuring that Melody has mastered the reading skills that are most foundational to her personal reading progression, she'll know exactly which items belong to her and can be confident on test day. We will have to be careful, though, to ready her at the cognitive complexity at which each of these skills will be assessed. If we put Melody on a deliberate trajectory for success beginning now, her chances of success in high school will be greatly improved. Test scores will never show us the whole picture. In fact, they give us a pretty small window into what a student understands and can do, and how they feel about coming to school every day, and their confidence in themselves as learners. Test validity lies in the quality of inferences we're able to make in analyzing the data. We can certainly make some fairly solid inferences in a student that increases their state percentile every year. Regardless of how we try to relieve some of the stress our kids feel over this test, external forces will play a part in making the test a really big deal. To best help our kids feel that they're most comfortable, confident, and motivated on test day, we can individualize each student's testing experience. EVAAS helps us to set individualized curricular goals for each student that aren't too overwhelming or under-challenging. Maximum growth for individual learners will be achieved by selecting the proper skill goals for each student. If we put too much weight on the bar or too little, we won't be satisfied with the results. No matter the academic goals set for each individual, rigor should remain high and be equal for all students. Stay tuned for other short videos about how EVAAS can be used to help us maximize the potential for growth of every one of our students. And feel free to share this video with anyone that you think would be interested.